So we can begin with the usual prayer. Teacher to student, student to teacher. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Punuktu Sahaviryam Karavavahi Tejasvinavaditam Astoma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us, may that one nourish us. May our study together be vigorous, enthusiastic, and rewarding. May we have strength in our daily activities. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. And peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is essentially a question-answer session. So I wait with bated breath for any questions that arise.
I have a question, Swamiji, about inferior and superior prakriti. And it's in relation to chapter 7, verses 4 and 5. It's really is a lot of double Dutch to me. So should I read it out?
Yes, that'd be fine.
With the commentary, yeah?
Yeah.
So, okay, so verse 4. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, thought, manas, and reason, buddhi, egoism, ahamkara. Thus is my prakriti divided eightfold. And the commentary that goes with that is, which is a lot of, I can't get this at all. Earth stands for the subtile rudimental element, or Tanmatra, the Prithvi Tanmatra, or the subtile rudimental element of Earth. And so water, fire, air, and ether stand for the Tanmatras of water, etc. Thought, manas, stands for its cause, ahamkara, or egoism. Reason, buddhi, for the mahat principle, which is the cause of ahamkara. And ahamkara for the avyakata, the unmanifested, co-joined with ayvida, or nescience. Just as food which is mixed with poison is itself called poison, so the avyakata, the first cause, co-joined with the vasana, or latent unconscious impression of ahamkara, is itself here ahamkara, insomuch as egoism is the impelling cause of all. As a matter of fact, we find from our ordinary experience that egoism is the cause of the activity of every being. Thus, divided eightfold is my prakriti, the maya belonging to the Ishvara.
Okay. Let's pause there.
Sorry about all that.
So avyakta, yes. Okay. See, to the human mind, the Lord's power appears to us as nature. Prakriti means nature. And in fact, there are two terms, Sanskrita, Prakrita. Sanskrit, the thing that is refined, Prakriti, the thing that is rough. Nature is rough. Nature is designed basically to follow the laws of frustration. That's why you're frustrated. So let me see what we all mean by this. You see, science is trying to understand nature. And Prakriti, of course, beautifully is a term put into a feminine form, feminine gender. We can say Mother Nature. But this Mother Nature is really the appearance to us of the Lord's power. Synonymous terms for nature, Shakti, energy, power. In modern physics terms, we can call it energy. The difficulty is, of course, in science, nobody can define what is energy. Energy, from ancient times to now is deemed to be inscrutable. We can't determine what it is. Modern science today is exploring nature, and if we equate nature with Maya, what do we mean by Maya? The thing that we can measure. When we try to measure something, it fails. It doesn't always fail. It fails when things are categorized and defined. And what is being used here, all the ancient schools of thought in Vedanta will refer to the most ancient categorization of nature that is found in Sankhya, the Sankhya system. I mentioned this before. So the final conclusions may not agree with the Sankhya philosophy as a philosophy, but they will all agree in terms of the structure. So what is being described here is a structure, and God's power being lower in the sense of it is manifested. So we have examples. Krishna used the example of fire and its power to burn. See, milk and its whiteness, a kind of manifested quality that goes along with the substance, and yet is not different from the substance. So when we say lower, we are making a hierarchical structure for ease of understanding. And we are catching the very lowest aspect of this. That's what I call lower. We're catching the very lowest aspect. You put it in a different way. Supposing we have a series of waves in an ocean. We're ignorant of the ocean. Our vision is so limited. All we see is the crest of a crest of a crest of a wave, just the very top piece. Because we are dimensionally deficient. Dimensionally deficient means we only have 5 ways of looking at things, and these are the 5 senses. That gives us only 5 objects. 5 objects, 5 senses to catch them with. Now, there are, in this categorization of Sankhya, some 24 categories are there. And it is very useful to understand what these are. But the most important aspects of these will be the subtle elements that come out. When you understand the subtle waves, unseen, so subtle that we can't trace them with the organs that we have. Now we can get a clue of them through modern science. At the very, very subtlest and minute level of modern science, we get some inkling of effects. So I mentioned before, if you ask some kind of quantum physicist, what is an electron? It's a vibration in Hilbert space. It means nothing. It has no meaning. So we have to form concepts. And the concepts we form are related to this crust of what we see, this tiny, tiny, tiny interpretation of the crest of a wave. And this we make our whole universe. And it's designed in this way because if things are not uneven, if things are not rough, we won't notice anything. If everything is in equilibrium, there's nothing to notice. It requires a little ruffling. One of the greatest minds of the 20th century and 21st century also was Stephen Hawking, who fell into Einstein's trap of thought experiments, unfortunately, as many theoretical physicists do. But he was extremely clever and extremely creative. He also got a few things wrong. And there's a famous argument in terms of black holes, which another scientist got right, and he admitted, with all due respect and with all humility, his mistake, his error. But one beautiful illustration he gives, and he was quite good at relaying abstract physics to the common public. The person who started that down-to-earth explanation was Richard Feynman. So he gives us an imaginary scenario, and he uses his Oxford dining hall to do it. He empties the hall so that there is a floor, slippery floor, nothing contained in it. Imagine now you put ball bearings in it. You fill it. That is tightly bound spheres, all squeezed in together, no room to move, all mathematically correct, in pristine condition. Nothing will move. You have to take a few out for things to shift and move. There's a great problem in modern physics. How is it that we have anything at all, since +1 and -1 all cancel each other out, and the +1 in this case is matter and the -1 is antimatter. Matter, antimatter, nothing should occur. In the laboratory, we can create matter and antimatter. We can create electrons, can pop up, we can catch it. An anti-electron can pop up. This is called a positron. And within a few moments, not even a second of a second, not even a fragment, they've all gone. Because they've met, they've had a nice embrace and finished. They've gone. So things glide into existence. Things cross across the border and leave us with blinking, as it were, with amazement, because what we witnessed was an appearance and disappearance. And what we witnessed was something that is imperfect. Imperfection on the one side, this we call nature in our common view, and appearance and disappearance, a kind of head-scratching mystery on the other side that we call the tiny world of quantum physics, that according to physicists is the underlying reality of this universe. So we have to make a starting point to understand what we're observing is nature, and the equivalent term for nature is Maya, the thing that we measure that seems to be there, but can disappear in a moment and is subject to time. Appearance and disappearance in a moment, we categorize into space. And changing its appearance, we categorize in the realm of time. So the common factors to nature will be time and space. Now, how to put this in a framework? 24 categories, the Sankhyas put it in. Let's start from the lowest area, the most inferior area, which is nature as we understand it. It consists of these 10 things I've mentioned. We know a universe is there because objects are there. How do we know objects are there? Because we have sense organs that catch it. How can we interpret it? There is a mind that is an interpretive faculty. And how can we endorse the truth of it and discern what is what? An intellect is required. And how does this intellect work? And how can we orientate that and systematically organize it around a central point? An ego is required, a sense of I, an individuality is required. Now, all of this is collectively called mind. Now we have reactive things because the efferent current comes in, the afferent current goes out. This efferent and afferent interplay is there in all creatures because we have to respond, not only notice the universe, we also have to respond to it. And the response is categorized in 5 different ways. Speech, for example, the movement of hands and legs, the organ of continued creation, the organ of evacuation. All these are response things. 5 of them are there, 5 organs are there. Smell is an incoming thing, all right? But touch and taste are incoming things. All of these are incoming things and corresponding reactions. 5 organs of reaction, 5 organs of information, and the mind collectively, and the objects. This is 16. Now we have 16 categories. Now what Sri Krishna does in this Bhagavad Gita is makes things much simpler for us. And the whole range, this 24 categories and more because we'll go further with it. Nature itself is the last category. This is synthesized into 8. So this lower aspect of the senses is there, and in waveforms behind that are rudimentary elements that we call Tanmatras. They have their subtle version, their corresponding version. Tanmatra means subtle element or mere element, mere things, mere categories. And they bifurcate progressively as a cosmic evolution takes place. In other words, as nature unformed, unmanifested, what we call avyakta, where no movement or ruffling takes place, now starts unfolding systematically. And with the systematic unfolding comes combinations, recombinations. Things become more tangible as they go on. Ultimately, crossing a kind of border that we register, this is our world. And it's inferior because it's only a small aspect of the entire nature which is registered. And these, I say, bifurcate progressively into all the sense objects, into the corresponding organs that catch them, that register them. And they are, of course, in order, all sounds, all touches or pressures, all aspects of radiation, colors, shapes, and tastes and smells, ultimately. This is on the one side. But on the other side, they evolve in order into all instruments that catch it. There's an old question, philosophical question. If a tree falls in a forest and nobody can hear it, does it actually fall? It's a very interesting question. So you have to have an ear to catch it, to make it a sound. Otherwise, just a vibration. And so all in ears, skins, eyes, tastes, or taste buds, noses, these are all correspondingly there. And the technical terms used for these would be Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Apas, Prithivi. Or in reverse order is what is mentioned. Prithivi, earth. Earth representing the subtle aspect of it. And then the earthiness is there. And this is related to the product of the earth, food itself. Because the nose catches the fragrance of the earth. Just to illustrate a little bit, in Africa in particular, because that's where all my memories are in terms of sensual memories of the beauty of a landscape. When it rains, you can smell the earth. The rainfall mingles with the earth and there's a scent that you get, beautiful scent from the earth. Another image that can be captured by yourselves when you, in the summer, whenever that is, you mow the lawn and you can smell the grass. So this is a beautiful way of relating the sense organs to the various aspects that we find dominating, in this case, earth. And these elements automatically combine, and they combine in different proportions. And they draw to each the thinker. The thinker is the equivalent of his thoughts and intentions. Because what is behind there is a higher nature. A higher nature is a witness, thinker, knower, all in one, which makes every thought infallible. Because ultimately, having described now 16 in the lower version of Prakriti, the most subtle level of nature being these 5 Tanmatras. We add another one, and that is all senses of individuality. All egos are put there. And then the next part of the categorization will be, where do all these come from? These all come from a cosmic mind. And so when we think, this is how we register, I think. We don't know it, but the ultimate thinker is sitting there behind. And therefore, every thought, every intention that comes out is completely infallible. And what would happen is, it will manipulate the proportional subtle elements and ultimately condense again. It's a bit like the pattern of rainfall. So there is the heat, if you will, of thought that has the capacity to raise up water vapor from the sea. And it plays a drama like that. It collects as clouds. When these clouds become dense and heavy, they fall as rainfall to the soil. This condensation aspect is called the world in front of us. And therefore, all systems are very keen to exhort you to please think in a proper way. Please think in a beneficial way. Please think in a way that will create a better world. Now we're all concerned with a better world. Many people who are caught up in pessimism will come to a conclusion: the world is not a good place. But I remind you that God made the world and saw it was good. So that must be the truth. Our pessimism must be completely false. And our pessimism is around this attention to this crest of a wave that impinges on our local area and brings the mind down, meaning the mind is no longer in charge. BBC is in charge, or RT is in charge, or CNN is in charge, or the newspapers are in charge, or the internet is in charge. And we become slaves to this. How can we make a better world? You have to change our thinking. Don't ask the Sankhya, why did God make such an unhappy world? Sankhyas are atheists. They say the difficulty is your wrong thinking. Please correct your thinking. But what is the basis for that? The basis for it is that the cosmic mind is there. Cosmic mind is there like the electromagnetic field, which is present everywhere, omnipresent. It is all-knowing, it's omniscient, and it is all-powerful, it's omnipotent. It is our personal God. So we can change the terms. And this cosmic mind is called Buddhi or Mahat. Mahat, the great one. The great one because it is the creator and manifests thought. And when we use it, it is creative thought. And we are creating all this combination that we call our world, including the liberty and freedom to sit down and complain about it. So the characteristics of the body and the surroundings will alter for the better only when our pattern of thoughts change and improve. Last week we completed the second portion of the Enneagram, and there are certain personality types who inherently have turned out to be overly optimistic or neither optimistic nor pessimistic, and some are pessimistic. That is, we have an inclination to change the world. But God made the world and saw it was good. No change is required on our part. Only putting in positive thoughts that have the effect of subduing and saturating everything else. Imagine if this whole world was saturated with thoughts of strength and beauty and goodness and love and peace and harmony. We would have a corresponding world like this, a corresponding body like this, on the local level, a corresponding body like this. So when ill health comes, the primary cause of ill health is essentially anxiety. When I give a talk on health, I put this as the prime cause of disease. Disease, of course, there are external factors as well, but the internal arrangement knows how to deal with them, provided you leave it free to do its job. Another way of saying, provided I leave God to direct things inside the body and outside in the world in front, everything will be as God made it. That is, that it is good. So this is the key to all spiritual practices and progress, that we take the sense organs and see that they must be considered to or I should say, take the sense objects. Take the sense objects and see that they must be considered in a certain way superior, since to all the other things, since it is for their revelation that the corresponding sense organs are molded. And we can find a reference to this hierarchy in the Kathopanishad. And it's interesting there also to read Shankaracharya's commentary on this. So we find it in, if you want to make a reference, the relevant is the first section and the third subsection, and the verse is 10th verse. And there you will see this hierarchical arrangement. And it's interesting to read Shankaracharya's commentary on this. So these impressions that are gathered through the five sense organs are coordinated by the ego, and that is in the mental field. The ego is part of the mental field. You hear this, many people not fully understanding, oh, we have to do away with the ego. It's a bit like doing away with a car part. You can't do it. It's not a destructive thing. Egoism, that is attachment to the body-mind complex, that's the difficulty. But the ego itself is just a psychological component. It's there in the mental field. And so the mind in this context can be considered equal to ego that operates through it. And an individual will grasp facts of experience because of the presence in him of this cosmic intellect, this cosmic mind. This is what we call buddhi in our own context. And therefore intellect, translated as intellect, and the purification of this is critical in spiritual life. One who has purified this intellect becomes a Buddha, one of purified buddhi, intellect. And so therefore this stands for what we call Hiranya Garbha, that golden seed or golden womb from which everything comes. And here we can see, cross-referencing, this concept of nous or logos, this cosmic mind, this cosmic word. We find in the Rig Veda this expression of vak, word. Almost word for word, this John's Gospel prologue in Christianity. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. The cosmic context, forget about the incarnation aspect, that's a theological thing, but this Word becomes flesh. In other words, it goes through all the combinations, recombinations, until it comes to this localized body, consisting, we may say, of organs of information and reception, organs of reaction, and the interpretive faculty of the localized engine called the mind. So this is called cosmic being and is called Mahat, this grade one. And next, if you read the text, comes egoism, and this in turn must be looked upon as its cause. That is the unmanifest, that is this what is called avyakta. So let's try to summarize. Five senses, the other three, mind, intellect, and egoism, standing for their backgrounds. Then egoism, then the cosmic intellect, and the unmanifest. So all of these combined create an eightfold presentation of what is called inferior nature, because the superior aspect of it, the high aspect, is the very life element by which this world is upheld and experienced. And this then is called, conventionally is called nature, prakriti, in its unformed, in its unmanifest aspect. But the highest nature will be that inexplicable, undivided, unchanging entity. And that conventionally we call Brahman. So what must we do as spiritual aspirants or students? We should make our attention penetrate all these layers of nature. Once we understand what they are. The Avakra Samhita makes a very telling statement. If you understand these basic great elements that we are calling Tanmatras, if you understand them fully, you've understood really the whole of nature. And when you've understood that, freedom immediately follows, is its statement. So once we peel back the layers of nature, only then can we make it lovingly fix on the Lord himself. As distinct from all his manifestations that science is currently studying, not recognizing them as manifestations, yet also recognizing that somehow there will have to be some generalized unity behind everything, something that will explain everything because we've gotten to a source. But it cannot be God in science. The science has intrinsically become materialistic science, and yet, curiously enough, retaining Abrahamic theology. I need to explain that a little bit. It is a common understanding amongst the majority of scientists, and this is going back, way back to Descartes already, and even actually we can say going back to Plato. From Plato's point of view, laws of nature exist in a kind of unmanifest form, in a kind of extra cosmic form. They exist outside of our reality. Carry things forward, Descartes, Isaac Newton, and so on and so forth, all of these great thinkers and scientists all understood that laws of nature stood with a lawmaker, which we call God, an extra cosmic entity, and was infallible, was enduring, was unchanging, was immutable, as I say, and that entity is gone in modern science. But the laws still remain. And curiously enough, I don't say all, but the majority of scientists take it for granted from this scientific tradition of Isaac Newton, Descartes, and so on and so forth, that somehow the laws of nature have always been there and they are infallible and immutable. Is a curious hangover from the Abrahamic approach that there's something outside. What we're discussing here is not like that at all. From our point of view, from our step-by-step, infinite stage of understanding, from our infantile, dualistic standpoint, we can take it for granted that there is an entity, a creative entity outside. And we can take this with a sweet, childish, or childlike, I should say, not childish, childlike faith. But it becomes childish when we become mature, more mature, that warrants a better understanding of things. And the more this maturity develops in beyond religious understanding, when spiritual understanding starts to flower, we can see that what we call nature is infused with this divinity. And once we understand it being infused with this divinity, our whole thought changes. This is what is called peeling off the layers of nature, one by one. It is useful to understand the principle of it contained in the Sankhya philosophy, these various categories. Because beyond the cosmic mind, nature itself is there as 24th category, but from the Vedantic point of view, we can extend it. We can say that make the 25th category will be this individual that may have three separate and different approaches, which may be connected also. One approach is that supreme principle, which is the ultimate category, the ultimate nature. This supreme principle can be related to as an extra cosmic entity. And we try to form a loving relationship with it. And we can call this God. And the next understanding will be a quasi-dualism, something that says No, there's a felt connectedness. And wherever I look in nature, I see this connectedness. This connectedness comes out in the Upanishads so clearly in multiple ways. Let us take, for example, this primordial element, fire. Even to the eyes, fire as understood with our visual understanding. We can see it as the sun, we can see it as lightning, we can see it as fire itself that can be lit. And we can feel it internally as an internal temperature. We can feel it as the digestive fire. We can think of it in this terms. And we can make a connectedness and say all of these are just variations of one basic thing. And we can call this thing fire. They're not literally fire. It's a subtle element that we label this by virtue of its gross connectedness and its gross description. And so this is what has led to a great confusion in modern scholarly interpretations of these terms. And people, particularly the scientific world, may roll their eyes a little bit and say, you see, these ancient people are so ignorant. They thought that there were only 5 elements in this universe of ours. Yes, they were far in advance. And what modern science has done is identified this fully and added a 6th. Now, when I say added a 6th, the ancient scientists understood only 5 things. Modern science has added 2 more things, which they've combined. Nuclear forces. Strong and weak nuclear forces have been added. Well, I think when we look at it properly, these will be just variations of the last 2 from the Sankhya categories. Well, let us go from the top, the most subtle, what we call Agasha. All sound, all vibration is also an unmanifest form because it is so subtle. It is more like a field, like the electromagnetic field containing a potential. And this then will contain potential energy. If we put in energy terms, potential energy. Potential energy there, and we can also see how it works, and we call this gravity. That thing that wants to pull things in and unite everything. And then that manifests as kinetic energy. We can test it out with a pendulum. We hold a pendulum up here and we let it go. Gravity is the force that brings it down, and kinetic energy is the force that brings it up again, and gravity, and there's a transference of this energy. One transfers into the other, so it goes on. And when it goes on in a more vigorous way, when, for example, the principle of gravity takes hold and falling happens and things are squeezed in, and kinetic energy, such as pressure and those kinds of intense energies take place, what comes out is fire, radiation. Radiation is an energy. It doesn't obey the laws necessarily of the others. And then we have that then cools down, and when we have this electrical energy. The electrical energy is the author of the entire world. Everything comes back to the hydrogen atom, which is pure electrical energy. And then that electrical energy then manifests itself as magnetism. Its effect is magnetism. What modern science 100 years or so ago did was it combined electricity and magnetism into electromagnetism. The ancient scientists kept it separate, but added one more in modern times, the nuclear forces. So these are scientific principles. But we have to also understand this. Vedanta says that all of this actually can be categorized in a sense as lower, because they are all Maya, and all science is studying is Maya. And science is discovering the inscrutability of this Maya. We always knew it. Maya is inscrutable. It is both real and unreal. It cannot be said to be purely existent nor non-existent. These apparent contradictions of terms are there within it. So we can say a 25th category can be jiva or soul that can see this separateness, that can see this connectedness, and ultimately that can see this oneness. These three philosophical approaches are there in the Vedanta philosophy. And that ultimate principle is described as Brahman. Now we can use the yogic terms because the Bhagavad Gita wants to reconcile different schools of thought and refers it really as the Supreme Purusha. It is the ultimate sense, so the ultimate person, the ultimate entity. So it divides nature then into Purusha and Prakriti. Later it changes the terminology. It acknowledges there's a knower and there's a known or a field of knowledge. And this field is described and beautifully tied in with the analogy of a battlefield. All of this endeavor in front of us is a field, and all of these steps and layers in nature can be viewed as fields with an observer, subsidiary observer behind it, until an ultimate observer is there, an ultimate witness is there. This is the highest of all. So for ease of understanding, we have these layers presented and this hierarchy presented. Only one, even earlier than this we find, understands this fully, one among many. And so I hope that I have shed a little bit of light on this aspect of this particular verse. The verse will go, Bhumir apo nalo vayuha kammano buddhir evacha ahamkara iti yam me bina prakritir ashtadha. This eightfold nature then is described in these terms, in these words. And then the text will go on. It will go on to say that this eightfold description is that is the Supreme's lower nature, but different from it in every way, in the fact that it doesn't change, it doesn't divide, that it is not finite, it is infinite. The higher nature, that is the indwelling spirit, that is life itself, which the universe, by which this universe is sustained. The effect is there and the cause is there. And know that these two wombs, says, continues the text, a beautiful statement, I am the origin and dissolution of the entire universe. These verses are verses worthy of meditation, because when we look at the whole universe, we can see what the Taittiriya Upanishad is also telling us. In different terms, it is saying, I am the origin, the sustentation, and the end, if you like, or the dissolution of the universe. Theologically, Hinduism produces this in a kind of trinity, a creative trinity or manifesting aspect of the trinity, a preserving aspect, creating a protector and a protective field, and one that is dissolving what? Dissolving the universe, but more importantly, hopefully, dissolving our ignorance also with it. This avidya, this ignorance, this prakriti, this maya, all of these are deemed interchangeable terms. And it's useful to explore these terms because it gives us these different aspects of these same teachings, so that no one can be left out. The skill of the Upanishads and the skill of this Bhagavad Gita that you're studying is that it allows us to revamp and reflect and contemplate and meditate on the same things, the same profound things from different points of view because these are not easy to understand. Why are they not easy to understand? In principle, they're extremely easy to understand. But what makes the difficulty is it doesn't agree with our common view of the world. Only when we are told this world is just a phase. This world is a waking world. When you wake up, rub your eyes, you start engaging with it. A dream world is also there. And a blank stage is also there. Dreamless sleep is also there. And there is nothing whatsoever, says Krishna, higher than me. All this is a beautiful statement. See, it says, Mayi sarvam idam prutam sutre manigana iva. All this is strung on me as rows of jewels or gems or pearls on a string. So this statement alone is worthy of recalling time and time again and contemplating on. What a beautiful expression. Wherever we look, we find these like pearls on a string, strung. There's that connectedness all the time. So that it brings us from a difference to a connectedness and ultimately to a oneness. This is the beauty of these various texts. So it's 10 minutes to 12. So I hope that has shed some light a little bit anyway on this particular text.
Sometimes it can come clear and then it just goes again, you know.
Because what we're doing is we're struggling this view, which I can describe as appreciating, analyzing, and dealing with the crest of a crest of a crest of a wave. When we go deeper there, we find Tanmatras. We can categorize this whole thing into three things. So the first thing is that our view of the world. Yeah, crest of a wave, that's all we can see. Then when we have a broader vision through self-control, japa, meditation, a broader view, a more connectedness comes and we see, oh, I see there are underlying waves here. They're part of a whole wave system. We can call this nature. But there's a whole ocean below. And when we not just view it as if we were a distant viewer, but currently we're feeling, not only do I see this small view of this wave, but we make the error, I am the wave. This is called egoism. When we say, I am the wave, and then we understand more and more, and we say, oh, the Tanmatras are there. We can actually identify with those also. And then we go deeper and say, oh, I'm the ocean. We can identify fully with this. So this is the involuntary process of spiritual life. The other aspect will be the evolutionary process.
Can I ask you? Sorry, can I ask again this word? A-V-Y-A-K-T-A.
Avyakta. Avyakta means it's unmanifest.
Is that, I can't understand that.
Okay.
Avyakta.
Okay. Avyakta means unmanifest.
Yeah.
Electricity is unmanifest. Until we put a light bulb there. Then it manifests as light. So all of these categories are manifestors.
Yeah.
And there'll be different manifestors. And the manifestation will be different according to the manifesting element. These manifestors are called upadis. They restrict the potentiality. Yeah. And then when we hook it in, then it becomes manifest.
Right, yeah.
Manifestation only comes when two things are joined together. Let us take, for example, imagine now there is a reservoir of water, but we don't know it. It stands behind something. All we see is a river flowing. Then when we trace it back to the source, we find, oh, I see, it came from this vast reservoir. It wasn't actually manifest as a river at the time, but once it goes through small outlets and so on, once it goes through gates of a dam wall, for example, then we see it as a river. There are many people try to trace the source of the Nile, and then ultimately they discovered in Lake Victoria in Africa, a vast body of water that when you look at it is really a sea from the viewer's point of view. So we can replace these terms unmanifest with potential. Something is potential. And then it becomes manifest. We would never suspect that a tree is there in a seed, but yet it's there. We would never suspect that electricity is in the environment, and yet it's there. We would never suspect that neutrinos are subtle things. We can put it in particulate form, flowing through you as we speak, and they don't care about you and you don't care about them. So unmanifest means it is, we cannot really see it or relate to it because it is not fully expressed. When it expresses, it has to express through media, what we call upadhis, manifesting adapters, which also have the effect on the other side of restricting, as it were, because you can't restrict this energy of God, this great, great nature's force. So we can see things. You can take the example of the ocean. The ocean is unmanifest till it manifests as waves. Our view is the manifested. Below it is the unmanifest. I did have one question he brought to me, and I said that I would try to deal with it in the Vedanta series, but we didn't have a chance to do it. So I might just deal with it briefly if that listener is listening. The question was really around this particular area of the year, which is Pitru Paksham. That is an area that is seen to be auspicious for honoring and praying for and getting blessings from ancestors. Now, there are a number of different obligations that Hindus have, but I don't want to address this as a Hindu thing because it is much more significant to me to bring it up as a more universally relevant thing. But there are various duties that all of us should have. So there's one thing that is a duty that sometimes we forget. It's a duty to ourselves. A duty to ourselves, and of course, the third duty is duty to the ancestors, but we have to look at the context. So duty to ourselves means that we have to make sure this body, this instrument, which we can view as a God-given instrument, something like a car, needs to be looked after. My way of looking at it is that this is not my body, it's not my mind. If we revalue this combination as God's housing or God's temple, and we revalue the mind as God's throne room or sitting room, then all we really have to do is adoration and worship by way of cleaning. And so my way of dealing with health is clean the body inside and outside. Outside, everybody knows how to do that. But today, in the COVID virus situation, we have highlighted some aspects of physical hygiene, such as washing hands, not touching the face, things like this. Everywhere you go into a shops here in Ireland, there's a mandatory application of masks. So we still have maybe somewhere to go internationally about physical hygiene, that is purity of water, latrines, and so on and so forth, these kinds of things. But then there's the internal hygiene. We have to exercise the body move the lymph around, just as you'd exercise any mechanical thing. And we have to exercise, we have to make sure that the proper fuel goes in, and above all, the proper thoughts are there, because as I said before, it manifests immediately as the body. So looking after this machinery is equivalent to a duty towards oneself, and then one's own moral life, equivalent to good intentions in thinking. And then there's a duty toward what is viewed as deities, gods. That is God in the form of these manifesting elements. Because as I mentioned previously, what we call God's glories and powers and forces and energies are ultimately what comes out as this common world, but is really in the form of, we can say, angels making the crooked paths straight for us. These are called the Tanmatras. And these are manipulated by a cosmic mind. And so it is God and God's energies, what we call nature, is equivalent to God himself or God itself. And so we have a duty to worship this. Then the third duty is toward the ancestors. What we are now is a culmination of genetic influence of thousands of ancestors on either side, paternal on the one side, maternal on the other side. Now, the obligation, the thankfulness for fulfilling all the wishes of the ancestors through this body-mind complex has to be there. It is only through their efforts that we have come here. And some of them may require our assistance in moving them on forward. In African culture, this is extremely important. And all these ancient cultures really have this coordinated, this cohesive element going back to their roots in Africa. The African religion is essentially spiritism, ancestor worship. And if the ancestors are pleased, your life goes well. If they're not pleased, it doesn't go so well. On a more kind of intricate and subtle and rational level, it is our duty to be concerned with the benefit of all beings, including those that we cannot see and those that are connected to us through ancestry. And so that's the importance of this. And we also get their blessings and good wishes because we have to think of the whole of nature that we've previously described as one thing, not just our small, tiny view of things. Cosmic energy is there. Everything is just seamless at the end of the day in terms of energy that we call prana, in terms of life, and in terms of nature, ultimately in terms of the highest principle. And then there's our duty toward, if you're a householder anyway, toward progeny. And if you're not a householder, if you're a monk or a nun, then toward the whole world, the whole of the incoming world and the outgoing world. And that leads really to the fifth principle, that we have a duty toward all fellow beings. We forget these because this aspect of it, when we somehow make a distortion of this law of karma, when we come across somebody in unfortunate circumstances, particularly in countries where there is an abundance of people that are undernourished or struggling in their poverty or struggling in their education, and simply to dismiss it is their karma. It is your karma to assist them. So we have a duty toward fellow beings also. And then we have a duty to all living beings. This is something that we forget, and it manifests specifically in leaving food out for birds or animals. And then generally a duty towards the whole of society. We have a duty to not only be good citizens, but to encourage the youth also to be good citizens. Moral duties are also there. Professional duties are there. Don't forget, karma yoga is equanimity of mind and skill in action. We have to use the full skill of our abilities, not to squander them. And then in this modern context, we actually have a duty, if we are connected with a Sanatana Dharma, an eternal religion, or an eternal law, or an eternal set of principles, we have a duty to harmonize that. Friday, not Saturday, Friday, was the 127th anniversary of the wonderful speeches that were given at the Parliament of Religions by Swami Vivekananda. And if we see what all his speeches are about, they're all to do with harmony and understanding. And it is this aspect of harmony and understanding that goes way beyond the level of tolerance that is necessary in this day and age. Because, as Vivekananda himself pointed out, more blood has been shed due to God and religion than any of the cause of the world. Of course, by his time, First and Second World Wars had not taken place, and that, of course, took more than anything else. Still, we are still fighting, thinking that our extension of egoism in terms of nationalism, religion, culture is valid, and it's not. And if we are to contribute in any way selflessly to the world, it is necessary for us to propagate this universal Vedanta philosophy that creates a harmony. Now, this ancestor worship is particularly highlighted at this particular period of time, the period of time where the full moon, the Purnima, on the 1st of September, or shortly after that, will extend for 16 days in terms of the waning of the moon. And the moon and ancestors are connected. And we have to understand that from this limited hierarchical point of view of advancement, so to speak, is from world to world. So if we have people who are in various lokas or positions that are parallel universes, we may say, who need our assistance and advancement, we need to be cognizant of that. And the very intention of it will give us a blessing, because it's a thought movement of benefit that has its effect as benefit to us, because we are part of the overall totality. When we wish welfare and goodness for all, health and beauty and goodness for all beings, harmony and peace for all beings, we are actually included in it. It's an all-inclusive formula. Therefore, all prayers should be on that basis. May all beings be benefited. See? May nobility, noble thoughts come from every side, and may all beings, Sarva Bhuta, may all beings be benefited. So there are many prayers there which highlight this all-inclusiveness. So with those few words addressing that particular subject, we can leave it there for today, and we'll pick it up next Sunday. It's very important to come with a question, because you can see how that can enrich everyone's point of view and at the same time address the particular concern that we may have, either in principle or practical spiritual life. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.